So I think we're live. I kind of need to see myself, right? Can you guys see me? Let's see. Is there a person in the screen? Is there a person in the screen? Oh, there I am. You guys can hear me and see me? Can you let me know in chat? Nice, nice, nice. I love it. I love it. Okay. Let me see if I can get the multi-chat pulled up. Okay, why is it... Okay. People are like, I see you and I'm not AI. People are like, it's a little laggy. Okay, little laggy, that's I think just a function of the software. Because we're multi-streaming. And so let me see, by the way. Let me see if I can make sure. Broadcast settings, same as OBS. Yeah, I should have been doing this earlier, but we're gonna let people kind of filter in. Multipass. Man, that's an old school joke right there. Okay. And surrounds. All right. Okay. Not like it on YouTube. Oh, good. Good, good, good. Damn, the whole squad is here for real. There's a ton of you guys. I love it. I'm super into it. Nice, nice. Yeah, people are like, is this going to be the start of a new war? Let's talk. We're gonna talk about it, lads. We're gonna talk about it. Okay. I don't. People are like, how's the weather in USA? It's cold, dog. It is cold, at least today. It's cold by it's cold by Texas standards. That's what I'll say. It is cold by Texas standards. Yeah, so we're gonna let people kind of filter in, and then what we're gonna do is let's see. Okay, I see you guys. I'm gonna try to close this so I'm not using up more bandwidth, right? Just pop me in chat if you can still see me, because I closed my YouTube interface. I'm relying entirely on the software, the stream elements. So yeah, people from Ukraine, always love it. Yeah, it's way colder there, dude. It's way colder there. Jesus, over an hour to de-ice your car. Winnipeg, dude, how are you people even alive? You must be freezing all the time. And do you guys have like the 24 hours of darkness? Is it that high up, or do you get a couple hours? Sorry, I'm keep looking at my hands because I made, well, I'm always drinking coffee. Basically, if it is before 3, coffee. If it is after 3, strike gum. That's my rule. So what are y'all's New Year's resolutions? Let me know, right? Yeah, let me know what y'all's New Year's resolutions are. I'm sort of curious. And again, we're just letting people pull in, and then we're gonna talk about this China thing, right? But again, that's what we're here for. Freaky Toes, that's funny. I wonder what side of World War III Thailand and Cambodia will be on. What's interesting is that the Thailand-Cambodia conflict is actually sort of a proxy conflict. Thailand has been a long time Western-aligned country, right? That's why there's so many Thai restaurants in your in basically anywhere in Europe and anywhere in the United States. You can get a pretty good Thai food, and it's because Thailand has an express program to support these sort of cross-cultural exchanges in Western countries. You can't get Thai food in China to the same scale because Thailand just doesn't have this Chinese orientation. They view China as a threat, correctly, by the way. Cambodia, on the other hand, is a much more authoritarian country. I mean, Thailand is too. But Cambodia has a way more Chinese orientation. So in some ways, this conflict is seen as a proxy war. It's just not. It's unclear that the United States realizes they're in a proxy war. China does. Thai food is everywhere and good. Mm, yeah, ride my bike more. Dude, that's my goal too. I want to get faster on the bike. I did two 70.3s this year, and I did one in like March and then one in November. The one in November, I did worse on the bike. No, I'm sorry. I did slightly better on the bike, but then I completely crashed out on the run. I was so bad on the bike. So I think I just need just volume. There's no saying bad Thai food. Oh, brother. I mean, you spend enough time in the United States, you're gonna know there's good Thai and there's bad Thai. And you know what sucks is that sometimes, like when I was stationed in Kansas, there was one amazing Thai food place. It had this one massaman curry that was so good, and it was so peanutty, and it was just a little sweet, and it was amazing. And when I moved to Italy, I spent the entire time I was there trying to recreate it perfectly. The only bad Thai food is Cambodian. Shots fired, dude. Yeah, hit more volume on your workouts. Yeah, definitely. Dude, strike gum is clutch for that. That is what my wife does when she either works out or does tennis, or when she does both, she pops it. And and that's the appeal, right? Is that like she's like, "Listen, by the time I get to the courts, the caffeine has totally hit me and I'm hyped up." The Europe and the doner kebab. Tom, Tex-Mex. Yeah, dude. Especially like, where I am in Texas is very, very Hispanic. So like, yeah, there's Tex-Mex places. Everywhere's a Tex-Mex place. And when it's good, it's quite good. But when it's mid, it's like there's this tiny sliver of really good Tex-Mex. There's a tiny sliver of really bad Tex-Mex. And then everything else is exactly the same in the middle, right? All the refried beans taste the same. All the rice tastes the same. It's all rice and refried beans. Like if you've had one enchilada, you've had 100. And that's not a dig on enchiladas, right? Like I have Mexican friends that cook and it is like amazing. It is on another level. I'm like, so it's possible. I think what happens is that if you're really good, you don't do a brick and mortar. You just sort of, you cook in batches that you want to make and then you sell them to friends and family, right? Pho noodles, dude, pho. Oh, I love pho. Oh my God. Is Trump giving Taiwan to China and Ukraine to Russia? Probably. Probably. Only good ethnic food will never pass a health inspection. I think there might be some truth to that, man. I don't know why, but the less commercial they are, the better. In fact, if you ever go to Mexico City, the the like the appearance of cleanliness, don't even look at it. It's not a meaningful predictor. What you do is you go where the locals go, full stop. And so sometimes I would actually sit there, like stand on a street, like on the street corners, there's these like alleyway, basically there'll be like six places to eat all next to each other. And you just got to stand there for a while and wait until you see like two locals. If you see two locals go to the same spot to the exclusion of everywhere else, boom, that place is legit. Because the other thing is that like what keeps the food sanitary is a lot of times just high turnover, right? Like if you grill the sausage and you put it on a sandwich and you serve it inside of an hour, it's more likely to be healthy. Whereas somebody may have, with no customers, may have grilled that sausage in the morning and now it's 3 p.m. and it's been sitting out, Yeah, a burger place with a B rating is going to be fire. That's right. That's right. It also is like the B rating just doesn't deter people, you know? Who wants fish tacos? Dude, there's a place in Mexico City that has phenomenal fish tacos. They are so good. Did Afghanistan have any good local food? Yeah, dude, the naan bread. Dude, the naan bread. And they would have this rice with cashews and like raisins in it. But they were like real dry. I've never, also one of those things, it's like my white whale. I've never been able to recreate it. I sometimes even there's a local Afghan food truck and they have like their version of it and it's so mid and it hurts my heart how mid it is. Are you allowed to eat local food when on tour? In Afghanistan, yeah, I actually encouraged it. This sounds insane, But, you know, we all got sick from army issued food. So I was like, well, that ship sailed. And so I was like, listen, our mentality was, and we were in an area with like a pretty bustling market, like a pretty commercially successful place. Our rule in Afghanistan, at least in my platoon, was, hey, buy shit from the market, because every single storekeeper that does business with you and sees you as a reliable source of business is not going to want that to dry up. And ultimately the locals are likely to go to the Taliban or other insurgents and be like, hey, dude, not these guys. These guys, every time we walk by, they order hush puppies from my little fryer. Hey, every time they go on patrol, they buy one of the chickens from the local market to kill and eat, right? Hey, they order 15 naan at a time. I'm not going to, and you know, obviously you can imagine the Afghans are going to upcharge us, right? Even if they tripled their prices for the Americans, it was still really cheap. And so I just was like, buy shit, dude, buy shit. Like, once you buy it, it's yours. So if you feel like you got ripped off or scammed, you're not going to go fight them about it, right? But like, buy everything. Make these, like, every family that economically enjoys a higher standard of living because of their interactions with us is one family that's going to protect us, right? That was my mentality. Ooh, you Blaze tube, Blaze tube. My son packed strike gum for his job at Palmer Station in Antarctica. That's so cool, dude. That's so cool. I really want to try to get like photos of people just doing the strike gum, like holding their strike gum in crazy places, right? Palmer Station, the guy on the North Sea oil rigs, some of the drone pilots who have already asked me for more. So we got to get them some more. Actually, I'm going to write that down. I got to do that. I know everybody logged in here and was like, okay, man, you gonna talk about the China thing? Hey, I'm letting people come in. Yeah, strike gum 2 drone pilots. It's actually a drone lab. Okay. Have I ever tried vegan food products? That is not the Paul I know. Believe it or not, I have sort of accidentally. Never substitutes, right? Like the vegan equivalent to grated Parmesan cheese is called nutritional yeast or something, and it sucks. But sometimes you eat good food and somebody goes, oh, actually, this doesn't have any meat products. And you go, huh, well, that's cool. Fundraiser to send strike gum to Ukraine. I'm thinking about it. I'm actually thinking about doing a thing that's like buy a pack, give a pack or something like that, where you're like, hey, buy a tray, give a tray. Where I say, hey, you buy a tray and we'll you donate at cost and we send another tray to the units in Afghanistan, right? So you buy a pack and we send a pack to the guys. Something like that. Well, here's the thing. You're like, I don't want to become dependent on strike gum. One, I mean, if you become dependent on something, you become dependent on caffeine. So you'll meet the same need with a coffee or an energy drink. Obviously, I think strike gum is just objectively better. Okay, you're sarcastically being like drone dropping strike gum to the front because it is so compact. I guess I should probably pin it and stuff. Because it's so compact, right? You have to think guys in positions that have to get supplies flown to them via drone. One, they can't freeze-dried coffee. They have to combine with water, and they need that water for other shit. And they need a compact way to get a lot of caffeine. This is it, right? They chew one of these a day. It's the equivalent of popping a Red Bull every day. So this keeps them sustained for caffeine for a week. It's actually excellent. And this isn't like an idea. I know for a fact the 93rd has done it. The 93rd has dropped this in positions. It is better than smoke. Is it better than smoking? Yes. Well, yes, for sure. For sure. Is there a shelf life for strike gum? It's like years. We tested it for 3 years, but it's probably longer than that. Send them riddle on the front line. See, the problem is with some of that stuff, you have big crashes, and because we're sugar free, I think there's a little less of that crash energy. Yeah, heating water, that's a good point. Heating water when you have only a couple of eco flows or whatever, that's also sucks. Okay, I know you're a troll, Code Force. Paul's no different than Trump. USA troops are mercenaries, not heroes. People watch too many movies. Look at Gaza. Okay, what is the total number of United States military personnel deployed to Gaza? That's my favorite. Like, I'm not gonna say that if you're going to be a hater, let me help you. If you're gonna be a hater, what you say is American troops are mercenaries. Look at how mercenaries. No. What you want to do is say, oh, the American military is full of mercenaries. Look at how contractors like Lockheed Martin send you soldiers off to die, right? To make big profits. That's how you frame that. Because I promise you, I made like 50 grand a year deployed to Afghanistan, and boy howdy, that was not that much money. So again, if you're gonna be a troll, dude, please be a good troll. I'm actually personally hurt when the trolls are dumb, um, because because they're bots, and I'm worth more than a bot, guys. I'm worth more than a bot. USA keeps arming the Zionist terrorist. I don't love the framing, but we do keep it arming Israel despite the very credible allegations they've done some bad things. But I don't talk about that as much anymore because somebody. It's fine. It's fine. I just know. Trolls don't even try anymore. Trolls really fell off, dude. Yeah, 50K is like 25 bucks an hour. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bitching about it, right? 50K, I think it was a little more. I think it was probably ended up being closer to 60 after the combat pay and the hazardous duty pay. But it's not taxed. You don't receive state or federal taxes. I know you're like, don't give them attention. And I don't as a general set of principles. But sometimes if I'm going to farm their comments for content, I'm gonna do it. Well, if you're gonna troll me, you gotta troll me legitimately. You gotta go after, Yeah, definitely Russian trolls. Yeah, that's the thing that you guys gotta remember is that because I deployed to Afghanistan, I am permanently receiving VA benefits, forevers, and that's medical care, guys. So it's not no cost, but I pay in total less than $200 a year to get all my routine care through the VA. There's a couple of times where I've paid out of pocket. I had like a thing on my skin where I was like, hey, I should really get this tested like now. And they were like, whoa. And the VA was like, well, we'll get it done eventually. And I was like, not eventually. So I paid cash for that. But the rest of my life having $100 to $200 a year of total medical expenses is really, really good. Really good by American standards. A typical American, right? For example, my son, when he was born, 0 complications. He was in such a hurry to leave. He knew that we had an induction date. He must have heard us. He showed up 24 hours prior. My wife's labor was like 8 hours total. Literally, they told her to stop pushing at times because he was showing up so fast. Popped out, was so healthy and strong. He tried to roll out of the physician's arms. He's like, no, stay here for a minute. There's no complications, and it was still ran us 10 grand. That's with insurance. With insurance, guys. Oh, yeah. So people are like, hey, I just got here. I thought we were talking about Taiwan. You're talking about your kid and how expensive it is. I'm letting people kind of filter in, okay? We're going to start talking about it. Do I think they'll start targeting anti-Christian or anti-capitalist vets and take their benefits away? I actually think more likely they're going to start. I think what we might see is I think what you're going to see is if they ever actually decide to start controlling costs, veterans are seen as a liability, right? They fought their wars are over. Let's kick them to the curb. And so they'll sit there and they'll say, oh, well, we just want to verify everyone's disability. So you have to like go to your VA hospital and you're going to be examined by VA doctors and get your disability verified. And then what they'll do is they'll say, oh, but we only assigned one doctor to it and he can only see 6 patients a day. And so that there'll be is like a 3-year backlog to verify your disability. And while that 3 years is happening, of course, the government's going to stop payments just in case to prevent fraud. And so it'll serve to kick all the veterans off of their disability payments. And they'll do the same thing with the VA. They'll just cut the VA until you go, okay, well, because like right now, I can generally see a physician. I can see like my primary care. If I need to, I can get an appointment within about 7 days, like have a video appointment with my actual primary care physician, not just the random PA that's on duty that day. I think what they'll do is they'll just cut staff until it becomes like comically inept, right? Where you go, hey man, I can get an appointment 2 years out. That's kind of what the VA cuts were going to do. They weren't going to target medical providers, but they were going to target like schedulers. They were going to target nursing assistants, anybody that made the system like run nice and smooth. They were going to target those people. Yeah, Zach Hazard having PTSD about the VA, I completely believe. And it's gotten better again. And every VAs are highly regional. And so I live near a large military base. And so our VA is like very well funded. But that's not necessarily true of anywhere else. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Your 3-month-old has RSV, Evan Warwick, dude. That's so dangerous, and they're too young for the vaccine, right? That's so scary. That's so scary. I'm, I'll be thinking about him. I'm thinking about him. That's what I don't tell you about being a dad is that it gives you level 1 perms over everyone else's kid, but it also gives you level 1 worries about everyone else's kid, right? Like when my neighbor's 3-year-old, like he like face planted off a trampoline and like I felt that here when I watched him do it, right? He's not my kid, but he's a kid and I like my kids. So, presumably I just don't mind all other kids. Okay, should we talk about we're talking about everything. I too am procrastinating from doing my work because it's the holidays, right? Sorry. Okay. Well, let's talk about it. All right, guys. Let's do it. Just give me 1 sec. Chinese military warships have surrounded the island of Taiwan, but there's more to this story than you might think. Is this China sending a message? And is this message stay away? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to break down this really weird turn of events. So let's get into it. Now, the PLA, by the way, that stands for People's Liberation Army. But what you should remember about China is that there's some translation stuff, and the People's Liberation Army is the military, is their Department of Defense. And so it literally, there's when translated to English, it's the People's Liberation Army, or think of it as People's Liberation Army Ground Force, People's Liberation Army Navy, People's Liberation Army Air Force, and People's Liberation Army Rocket Force. That's how we generally translate it. So when we say the People's Liberation Army has conducted naval drills around Taiwan, it's not crazy, it's actually normal, right? So they conducted what they called Justice Mission 2025. And these were what they claim are drills around the Taiwanese islands. Now, this is from a Chinese source. This is literally from the Chinese government. And so they say it's dispatching the Eastern Theater Command dispatched Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force troops to conduct drills in the Taiwan Strait, north, southwest, southeast, and east of the island, right? The drills, it says, are subject of Sea Air Combat Readiness Patrol, joint seizure of comprehensive superiority, blockade on key ports and areas, as well as all-dimensional deterrence outside the island chain. Now, what I want to point out what this means. I'm going to translate this from military. I mean, this is translated Chinese military doctrine. Okay. So Air Sea Combat Readiness Patrol just means, are you ready to conduct air operations, right? Can you launch aircraft off of your carrier? Joint seizure of comprehensive superiority. This means that joint just means all of these sea and air and rocket and ground forces working together to seize. What comprehensive superiority refers to gaining the military edge in a bunch of different domains. So getting superiority of the air over Taiwan, gaining superiority over the sea, gaining superiority over the undersea domains, gaining superiority over the electromagnetic spectrum, i.e. the enemy is jammed and you're not. Blockading key ports, no secrets there, and areas, as well as what they call all-dimensional deterrence outside the island chain. And so all-dimensional deterrence, again, refers to deterring, in this case, American forces, deterring American forces by simply along all dimensions. Again, under the sea, in the air, surface, electromagnetic, and then you have like cyber and space and stuff. So what's fascinating, though, is that China added this. They said their explicit answer, they said it's a stern warning against, quote, Taiwan independence, separatist forces, because remember, China has always considered Taiwan to be a breakaway province, a breakaway region, not an independent a separate country. It says separatist forces and external interference in a legitimate and necessary action to safeguard China's sovereignty and national unity. Again, you have to remember this is a little bit, filter this through like Putin speak. China's sovereignty, remember, they consider Taiwan part of China. And so the fact that there is a separatist region that China doesn't control is an affront to its sovereignty. Again, this is the same thing this is similar narrative to what Putin says about the Donbas. He says the Donbas is a legitimate part of Russia. And so it's an affront to Russian sovereignty that Ukraine tries to claim it, right? It's topsy-turvy world. Same with the lines about national unity. Putin says, well, the people in the Donbas, they're Russian. So it's really pretty wrong that they are Ukrainian, right? So before we talk about some additional Chinese spin maneuvers, and then we're going to talk about the real message that's baked into this, I wanted to mention that you notice that I am pretty critical of really a lot of entities that you really just aren't supposed to criticize anymore, particularly the Chinese government, right? A lot of companies now say, well, we do a lot of business in China, right? But I'm not LeBron. I say what I want, but that's because you guys have my back, right? Members of Combat Vet News, this is my version of Patreon that I control from soup to nuts. I pay for the hosting. It's all mine. Nobody can kick me off of it. And I can do that because you guys have my back. So you can become a member, right? We try to give you guys lots of benefits. Particularly, we take a look at combat footage sent to us in a lot of cases from units on the front lines. So just last week, before the holidays, we took a look at what I think is one of the first videos publicly released of a ground drone operation. And this is actually a ground drone that you guys helped fund in the fundraisers back in October. And we get to see it in action. So if you want to become a member, get access to those twice weekly combat videos. Plus, at higher tiers, you can get the Q&A and all that. Check the link in the description. Okay, so here's what I wanted to sort of dive deeper on. What's interesting is another Chinese, I'm trying to think of how to put this nicely, another Chinese government mouthpiece, a non-independent Chinese media, interviewed what they call like a national security professor about this operation. And I thought it was really interesting. Again, this is a more detailed version of this, but it included, I want to show you guys actually. So here's one of their promotional posters, right? Which I find sort of fascinating. This exercise released promotional posters. But this is a reminder that this is part of there's messaging that goes in a bunch of directions for these things. And clearly this isn't a message for Japan. This isn't a message for Taiwan itself. This is a message for the Chinese people, right? Because it's obviously written in Chinese, and it's not really pushed through non-Chinese outlets. And what these promotional images are, some of it is to bolster support within the Chinese military for like, yeah, big exercise, we're going to do it, right? You notice, and this is a translation, by the way, of some of the propaganda points they make, right? They call it arrows of justice, internal control, external determination. And again, internal control, a reference to the idea that this is to China. This is a problem. The Taiwan question is about an internal problem within China. And they say, thanks to firepower and pinpoint strike, the arrows hit the main targets, crush independence. I love that they use quotes too. Break the enemy's spirit and drive the enemy away. Now, you notice that, again, break the enemy's spirit, but also drive the enemy away. Drive the enemy away implies that the United States is going to be an enemy that's going to intervene. And this is really one of the most explicit acknowledgments by China that I've ever heard of their strategy for retaking Taiwan. Now, it's not exactly a secret, right? We've known for probably 10 years that this is the basic building blocks of how they have to do it, which is isolate the island from external support and then deter, not defeat, deter the United States from intervening militarily, which means that they need to weaken the American political system such that it cannot choose to intervene militarily to support Taiwan, but also develop weapons that are dangerous enough to America's flagship systems that we are unwilling to commit them, i.e., it's a porcupine strategy to quickly swallow Taiwan and then become a bristling porcupine where you go, hey, do I really want to eat, basically make the U.S. military and the U.S. political system go, do we really want to eat this porcupine, right? We could, but is it going to be too spiny for us? Is it going to sink too many carriers, kill too many Americans, right? What are we going to do if the Chinese successfully sink a Gerald Ford class, right? And put 1,000 American sailors at the bottom of the ocean, right? What is the American public going to say? Are they going to say that Taiwan's worth it? And so that's the deterrent or driving the enemy away, right? You can see they add here, quote, justice will cut off any hands that destroy peace. You can see here, this appears to be some kind of like a bunch of military equipment reaching for Taiwan. You can see like some maybe oil or barrels and bullets here. This looks like AI slop, but never, I mean, I expect nothing else. Justice will cut off any hands that destroy peace, and all separatist forces advocating for, quote, Taiwan independence, unquote, will be crushed by its blade. And again, fascinated by this explicit acknowledgement that there is a Taiwan independence faction, and that, again, there's this American intervention that's supporting it in their mind. Now, it's interesting. There's also text that says complete unification of the motherland. It must be achieved, and it will be achieved. Now, here's the final propaganda image that sort of is fascinating because China came out and it gave a notice to civilian traffic to say, listen, these areas around Taiwan are closed. And I want to point out this observation that Taiwan is an independent country. It is, in all practical terms, independent. And yet, the Chinese, with no notice, closed the waters entirely around the island. This is, if you're a Taiwanese citizen, this is pretty scary stuff, right? To sit there and have your neighboring power close off all the waterways into your country. It's hard to even come up with an analogy, but it'd be like if China, I mean, imagine how it would feel if China was to unilaterally tell Australia, hey, we're blockading Sydney Harbor, Brisbane, and Perth. And Chinese warships are going to be conducting exercise right outside all of those harbors. The Australians would be like, the fuck you are. This is our territorial water, right? But the Chinese are doing this as you know, on one hand, it's a flex. It's, we can do this, and your American allies aren't going to stop us. And it seems like they're basically right because, again, we haven't heard from the administration. No one in the White House, the commander-in-chief, certainly seems to have no problem with this. And more troublingly is that there's another deeper message here, right? And the deeper message is that this is trying to create a boy who cried wolf situation. You might recall that prior to the invasion of Ukraine, Putin actually staged no less than 2 major military exercises on the Ukraine border, where he would mass troops, right? He would make a bunch of bellicose statements, make a statement that says, this isn't an invasion force, this is just exercises. And then those troops would dissipate. They'd go back home to their bases. And so that meant that on the eve of invasion, the same thing happened. Russian troops gathered on the border with Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov said this is an exercise, this isn't an invasion. And then those troops crossed over, right? U.S. intelligence inside of Russia knew that things were different, right? That they were bringing fresh blood bags, for example, into forward. That's something you don't do for an exercise, right? Because blood bags expire on a very short time frame. They're a really good indicator that a real military operation is going to take place. So, but the idea is that this is actually creating an environment where this is normalized, where the Taiwanese military, the international community, is not going to be alarmed when Justice Mission 2026 or Justice Mission 2027 happens, because the Chinese, they'll say, well, yeah, this happens every year, no big deal. But 1 year, it won't be an exercise. They'll actually invade, right? Now, I was fascinated by this article, again, from a Chinese website that interviews a professor who obviously is going to repeat the Chinese state stance, but he says, but the Chinese professor says that this is what he calls tightening the encirclement chain, right? He says the exercise zones for the drill are significantly closer to Taiwan's main island than those of previous exercises. And he argues that this is about proving that they can establish this tight blockade of Taiwan, that the PLA can get very, very close to Taiwan. And he also argues that, quote, each act of provocation by the, quote, Taiwan independence separatist forces and external interfering forces, again, this is U.S. support of the Taiwanese government, will prompt the PLA to advance one step further, right? He's arguing that the PLA is going to, like, tighten the blockade based on more external factors, but that's not militarily, it doesn't make any sense. You're not going to, like, it'd be like if Russia invaded with, like, Ukraine with, like, one tank brigade and was like, if you interfere with this tank brigade, we'll send 2 more. Like, that's not how military operations work. So I think he's just bullshitting and trying to create a fig leaf that, like, this isn't really invading a country. Because that's the thing. The Chinese, it's also important for Chinese kind of national narrative. They view themselves as being sort of the Chinese government as being like a homegrown grassroots rejection of what they consider colonialist oppression. And so if they use the colonialist oppression language to take Taiwan, it's going to be self-defeating from a propaganda perspective, right? They can't sit there and frame it as saying, hey, the Taiwanese people don't want to be a part of China. They want to be independent. They view us as a colonizing power, right? And that frame is, the Chinese government cannot ever adopt that frame. And so they have to have this kind of like, we're peaceful. We want a peaceful resolution, right? A peaceful blockade, a peaceful, carrier deployment, a peaceful, destroying of Taiwanese air defenses. That's kind of the nonsense they have to spin here in order to square the circle of being a nominally communist country, right? Power to the people, workers' rights, self-determination, while also conquering a group of people who don't want to be conquered. Right? And what's interesting, he says, second, encircling Taiwan on 3 sides, the 5 exercise zones have a posture of encircling Taiwan on 3 sides, sending an unequivocal signal, he says. To seek Taiwan independence by relying on external forces is a dead end. To return to the motherland is the only righteous path. Right? This is, I think, really interesting to say that, listen, you can't count this message of saying, hey, you can't count on your friends to back you up. Your friends won't back you up. And it's fascinating because he's sort of right. The Chinese are like, look, we surrounded your island with military troops and your friends just sat and watched it happen. What happens when next time this isn't a drill? Your friends are going to sit and watch that happen too. And so I think that is actually a really troubling message to send to Taiwan and to have as Taiwan, right? And then third, they said closing the door to beat the dog, a more explicit target focus and clear objective. It's interesting. They are saying that, listen, we're going to take out the government there, which they call the Lai Ching-te authorities, the Taiwanese elected government. But Again, he's saying, listen, it's effectively a blockade of the two key Taiwanese ports. And it's really targeting, it's just more targeted against ports. It's more of a blockade than ever before. And I think, again, you're seeing probably the start to false rehearsals in order to create this deterrent effect. Again, the quantity deployed is probably insufficient, right? You're talking about very limited numbers of amphibious ships, right? If you're going to invade Taiwan or if you're going to blockade Taiwan, and that's the core phase one strategy, is to essentially close the blockade very quickly and hope that the U.S. Doesn't intervene militarily, and then use a ground invasion force to take Taiwan if the Taiwanese government simply doesn't capitulate after a period of not receiving food. And so, I think the messages here are the boy who cried wolf, right? Fake exercises until one day it's real. Two, and sort of a core, like the related idea is we will isolate you, and your American allies will do absolutely nothing. And again, I think that's really credible because President Trump has explicitly told Ukraine when they were faced with the exact same situation, a large power that had a dubious claim on their sovereignty invading, President Trump's official stance is that Ukraine should have made a deal. Well, what deal was available to Ukraine other than capitulation? And that's what China is banking on. The Taiwanese government is going to come to the same conclusion. They're going to go, hey, man, the Americans aren't coming to help you. You should make a deal. And there's only one deal on the table, which is reintegration with the motherland. And then, of course, once you've reintegrated with the motherland, there's no deal to be done. They're in charge of you. So undoubtedly, Taiwanese government officials will end up in jail or worse. And any Taiwanese who care about the sovereignty or human rights or their right to choose their government are just going to be put in Chinese prison. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you to GMAT Club, Henry Russier, James Porsche, Paul, and Peter Fucci, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, I'm not gone. Don't log off. Don't log off. It was just, I just do that because I recut this and I drop it to the people who obviously can't attend the live stream. Oh, wait, you know what? You know what I realized? I bet a bunch of you guys dropped super chats and I can't see any of them. So if you gave me a super chat on that live stream, I am so sorry. I am completely unable to see it. Let me take a look. You're like, Taiwan's not sleeping. They are ready. I am not sure. I am not. Here's the thing. There's a limit to what Taiwan can do to be ready. Again, the strategy of the PLA is not a bad one. They're like, listen, why even fight a ground war if we don't have to? Right? They say, listen, instead of fighting this big crazy ground war, oh geez, well, a ton of you guys. Instead of fighting this big crazy ground war, why not just starve them until they capitulate? Just blockade them from getting food. It's easy. Okay, thanks to BK Knight for the $2. President Trump says it's nothing to worry about. LOL, LOL. He says, what happened to those 20,000 anti-drone missiles that Hegseth sent to the Middle East? Well, I think they're sitting on U.S. bases, likely trying to... some of them are probably being field tested, and then some of them are, again, sitting in U.S. bases, just prepared for a drone surge, which, by the way, U.S. military bases have been attacked by Iranian drones on a routine basis. It doesn't even make the news. That's how uncommon it is. Next one. Why does social media not talk about the elephant in the room? This is from James, of the country moving toward constitutionally provided for civil insurrection because of Trump tearing down the Constitution fear. Okay, so if the Constitution, I mean, it's not civil insurrection if you have states using authorities granted to them in the Constitution. For example, again, their right to self-govern. Like, the whole Constitution is like, listen, each state has the right to govern itself, and then there's a federal government that has certain authorities given to it. It's there's a section of the Constitution that says if we didn't give these powers to the federal government, they are reserved for states, right? There's no questioning it. So there's no like a civil insurrection. I haven't seen any evidence of one emerging. That's what I'll say. And again, I fought a real insurgency in the Taliban and in and we saw it in Iraq. I haven't seen anything that looks like that, to be honest. So yeah, because remember, an insurgency requires organization. It can't just be angry people. It requires an actual organization, and there just isn't one. Believe me, if there was, someone from the so-called Antifa organization would have been brought up on RICO charges by now, right? Remember, that's the DOJ's #1 priority, taking down Antifa, a huge organization of leftists, like threatening the very fabric of the United States. Remember all that? Yeah, still waiting on those charges, guys. Anytime you're ready, just hit them with the RICO charges. Okay. Thanks, Etor, 420, LOL. People, subjugation, Army, Navy, Air Force, Accost Guard. I'm not sure what that means. Dixie, thank you for the 199. Ukraine. Yep. Thanks, RHM. Great insight as always. I appreciate you. Saucy Man, been watching for months. Wish you were president. Thanks. Well, there's nowhere to go but up. There's nowhere to go but up. Listen, I can pass a mocha screen. I haven't been diagnosed with dementia or anything. Hot Ass Farmer says situations like Taiwan are why we need frigates. I mean, listen, anything that moves us away from battleship world, I'm in favor of. I think there's a naval warfare in the 21st century is going to look very, very different. There has not been a true naval war between substantive powers, significant naval powers, since World War II. So basically, all that's happened is that everybody has looked at World War II and they've built their navies to win World War II better and better and better. But the problem is that what happens if combat doesn't look like that? What happens if naval combat is dominated by just like drones trying to sink each other's ships, bringing food and logistics to a place? Like, imagine that world where you sit there and go, listen, where the fight becomes getting a ship full of food, a ship full of munitions to a port and offloaded safely through swarms of naval drones and swarms of air drones. And you have your own air drones and naval drones trying to find and intercept them before they strike these ships. How do you do it? Right. And so, I think that even ships like frigates may not be adequate, or the frigate of the future may be some kind of missile defense or drone defense frigate, right? Something just bristling with naval drones, or a sensor, a detect and intercept, right? Something that exists to just troll the waters and detect the existence of enemy strike drones, and then you deploy interceptors to chase them down and keep these seas clear, right? Maybe it just becomes convoy escort. I don't know what a dronified warfare looks like, but what I can tell you is, again, the Russian Navy is not structurally, like, it doesn't have vast differences from the US Navy. And that Russian Navy has been entirely annihilated by $300,000 Ukrainian drones. So whatever whatever naval combat of the future looks like, it has to robustly account for this reality. Again, let's say a frigate is $300 million. In order for it to be, it would have to be able to comfortably defend itself against, what's the math there? 150 $300,000 naval drones. No, 1,000 naval, $300,000 naval drones, something like that, right? So again, some version of a frigate. I think the future is some version of a specialized frigate. Yeah. Yeah, a boat will never have enough interceptors to beat a land-based arsenal. I think that's true. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It depends, because it's a little bit like the remember World War II, right? There were bombers, and bombers were big, expensive, heavy aircraft that could go a long way because they had to sink entire ships. An interceptor was a small, lightweight fighter jet that had smaller armaments, but intercepted those bombers much closer. And so that idea of saying, hey, we're going to have naval strike drones that are supposed to, again, in this scenario, maybe you have like, oh, this is a naval strike drone. Trying to say, hey, we're going to build these naval strike drones, and their job is to sink food trying to get to Taiwan, food and munitions trying to get to Taiwan. We don't want any of those cargoes to make it. And so they build larger ships. And then the job of, let's say, a frigate of the future, its job is to escort those ships and constantly have sensors looking under the sea, at the surface, above the air, sniffing out drones. And when one gets close, the interceptors don't have to go a long way, but they have to be very fast, and they don't need a huge strike package because they only have to destroy a strike drone, right? That strike drone has to have enough to sink an entire cargo ship. Do you see what I mean? Yes, this other Paul gets it. As drone technology advances, replacements are cheaper than upgrades, and that means smaller and cheaper is the future. Ding, ding, ding. Welcome to a war of attrition, where you win by being able to achieve effects. Like, cost per effect has to drop to nothing. Has to drop as low as humanly possible. The cost per ship sunk, the cost per drone intercepted, the cost, because remember, in my scenario, frigate as a drone defense carrier, right? When it achieves an intercept in this scenario, what was the cost in terms of crew, ship, like logistics cost per nautical mile sailed, right? Because every nautical mile of a crew eats a little bit, they drink a little bit, they maintain the ship a little bit, and they expend fuel. All of that factors into the cost. And then they have to deploy a specialized interceptor and hit it and take it out. So what is the cost of doing that compared to the cost of launching one of them? You see what I mean? If laser weapons get good enough, they'll neutralize drones quite easily. It's a massive if, dude. Because remember, a laser can only look at one thing at a time. And so you would have to have, I mean, it's theoretically possible, just like it's theoretically possible to have a super CRAM that just, and a CRAM already kind of does that, right? It just radar detects things sailing. But what happens if the thing sailing is below hull line, right? What if it's like just below the surface, right? How do you detect that? A CRAM can't. A laser weapon may not even be able to. How much land do you think you would need to start manufacturing drones for cheap in the US? Well, it depends on how much you want to do. You see what I mean? Where it's like, okay, like let's say you want to order brushless motors and control chips and video transmitters all from China, and then you just assemble them. The Ukrainians do that. They do that shit in a fucking in a space the size of my garage. Right? Now, how much of the supply chain, the manufacturing chain, do you want to own? Do you want to literally go from like silicon pulled out of a mine to a drone on the other side? Well, now you're talking about a city sized of manufacturing. Do you see how complex it is? Do you see how hard it is to win a modern industrialized war of attrition? Again, for the United States, the better bet, instead of having to retool the U.S. economy, which would be something like if it took us 50 years to deindustrialize, it'll take us another 50 to reindustrialize for future tech. So, instead of saying, hey, we got a 50-year plan to be able to go from mining silicon to turning out and lithium to turning out drone batteries, that's not realistic. We can't just have a 50-year gap where we just don't have military tech. So instead, what you have to do is what's called friendshoring. And you have to say, listen, how do we weigh the supply chain risk against the diplomatic risk, right? So like we said, Thailand, long-term US partner, stable government, hates the fucking Chinese. Maybe that would be a good place to say, listen, we'll help subsidize a factory to make brushless motors, right? And, oh, by the way, we'll hedge our bets. We'll also have our good friends in Mexico do it, because Mexico is also a staunch U.S. ally. So why don't we have two factories in these two areas where we can manufacture them for pretty cheap, almost as cheap as the Chinese, and then the U.S. will be a buyer. We'll subsidize them. We'll guarantee orders. We'll pre-order them, whatever it takes, right? And so that's what you kind of do. And you say, you ship us the brushless motors, and we do the final assembly here, and that way we can add our little military security tweaks to it. All of that is the option, right? And people are like, oh, well, what about like robotics and robot factories and dark factories? I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. The technology's not there, and two, someone has to make those fucking robots. Again, that's the supply chain issue. So, yeah. All right, so you guys want to talk about the other story that I think it's wild? Yeah, I read this. Russian oligarchs, not making this up, Russian oligarchs literally just sent a letter to Putin being like, please stop stealing our businesses. They're literally like, we don't want our businesses stolen anymore. Which is fucking crazy. Ray Taylor, how come we can't buy Mavic drones? It's because Don Jr. is heavily invested in a company that makes made in America drones. And if you want that company to succeed, you can't have Chinese competitors. Right? Okay. Should we talk about it? Let's talk about these Russian oligarchs freaking out. Russian oligarchs are literally freaking out at Vladimir Putin's repeated seizures of their industries. Is this the privatization of the 90s gone in reverse? And is this the most explicit and open dissent that we've seen from Russia's oligarchs since the war started? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to talk about it. Let's go. Okay, so Russian business leaders, this is, by the way, a very nice way of saying Russia's oligarchs are asking, i.e. begging Putin to ease what they call a wave of nationalizations. Now, nationalization refers to the fact that the Russian government is broke. And in order to make money, it is literally just seizing, not purchasing, seizing the assets, the businesses that are still profitable and making them government-run enterprises. This is, of course, because businesses are really valuable because they are these legal entities that make profit that can go wherever it needs to. And the government goes, well, we want that profit because we have a war machine to fund. And as you can imagine, if you're a billionaire Russian oligarch, you're probably a little miffed about this. So Russian business leaders almost certainly have tried back-channel, non-public ways of making their case. But they have literally now had to overtly appeal to Vladimir Putin to rein in what they call a wave of state asset seizures that has affected factories, ports, and major corporations worth more than $43 billion in all told, right? The executives were resorted to handing Putin a letter outlining their concerns during their annual end-of-year meeting with the president. This is insane, right? This is from the head Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, a business lobby, a business organization. Now, they said literally they raised the issue with Putin in 2023 and in 2024. And Putin said, yeah, I acknowledged the problem. It needed to be addressed. But then the nationalizations continued until morale improved. Well, morale hasn't improved. But the wild part is Shokin is literally in the press saying, yeah, we gave him a letter and we're hoping for a decision. He says we want a clear formula that would not leave room for interpretation by the courts. Now, this is hysterical because, remember, Russia doesn't have an independent judiciary. There is no real meaningful way for these businesses to avoid nationalization in Russia. But they pretend like the courts are the ones doing it because well, you can't tell Vladimir Putin to his face that he's a tyrant. He'll kill you, as of course happens, which is a totally not tyrant thing to do. Now, the funny thing is that the Russian courts, again, got their marching orders from the government that says, listen, we need to take possession of these companies. So there is no real meaningful defense. There's no way to beat the charges in court because the courts are rigged to do whatever Putin wants. But what's funny is that the Russian government is alleging that these business interests, quote, infringe on the intangible rights and freedoms of Russian citizens, particularly the right to, quote, a decent standard of living. Literally, they say the easiest way to nationalize an asset like a business is to declare that it threatens the citizen's right to a decent life. That is treated as a public interest the state can defend, even if no one claims personal harm. That means any property can be taken over by the state without compensation, which is kind of hysterical. It literally argues that if you run a laundromat, that because you do it for a profit, you're actually infringing on Russian citizens' right to a decent life, and that the government instead should run this laundromat also for a profit. So this whole thing is kind of insane. The government being like, well, you know, you're making too much money, but you should let the government make that money. And still, right, with no change in experience for the average Russian customer. It's really some like topsy-turvy, it's tyrant logic. It's clearly, and this is the point, right? This is direct quotes from Shokin. He's not saying these things because he thinks they actually make sense. He's pointing out that the government is just operating however it wants, and that it doesn't make any sense. He's actually saying, hey, obviously it's not helping the citizens' individual experiences because, again, these are still being run as for-profit enterprises. Shokin says, if the state needs something, fine, nationalize it, but pay for it, buy it from the owner, right? Again, this is the difference between eminent domain used by the U.S. government, in which, yeah, they can seize your property, or rather, a better way to think of eminent domain is they can forcibly exchange your property for money of the same value. But Putin has said, listen, it's funny. Putin has repeatedly said there'd be no no revision of the mass privatizations of the 90s, which transferred control of key parts of the economy to a small group of oligarchs. But he's going ahead and doing essentially that. In fact, the pace of seizing of private businesses has accelerated. In 2022, Russia reclaimed about 100 companies worth about 1.3 trillion rubles. By 2024, that number had nearly doubled, and by 2025 it was nearly at 3 times $4 trillion of rubles. Now the rubles are worth considerably less every year, but not by that much. This includes Russia's largest car dealership, right? Do you really think the existence of a for-profit car dealership is out here depriving Russian citizens of a decent life? An electrometallurgical plant, which obviously is essential to Russian citizens living the good life, is electrometallurgy. A gold producer, which again, Russian citizens don't eat, drink, or drive gold. A grain trader, okay. A warehouse operator, a lead producer. Yeah, you know, Russian citizens love their lead. Moscow's literal airport, and a food conglomerate, as well as entire ports, right? In Kaliningrad and Murmansk and the St. Petersburg oil terminal. So all of these things, again, are areas where the Russian government feels like there is money to be made, and they are just seizing assets to plug these budget shortfalls caused by Western sanctions. But before we look at just why these oligarchs are getting so desperate and what the real state of the Russian economy is, which is honestly fucking wild, I wanted to mention that obviously I make a lot of controversial videos on a lot of controversial topics, and I know you guys have my back, right? Because you're members at Combat Vet News. This is my version of Patreon, but it's run by me, hosted by me. Nobody can interfere with it. And if you become a member, right, we try to make it worth your while to support the channel. We drop twice a week, uncensored combat videos sent to me often from units on the front lines, particularly units that you guys have raised funds for. And so if you want to help these guys out, or if you want to help me out and see your handiwork, for example, just before the Christmas holiday, we actually looked at what I think is one of the first publicly released videos of a unmanned ground drone mission in real time. And it's one you guys bought, right? It's a special ground drone who's designed to go in and recover damaged ground drones from the front, right? So some of the most dangerous missions a drone can go on. And we got to take a look at that. So help me out and become a member. Click the link in the description. Okay, so how do you placate oligarchs given that they're so mad? Well, on one hand, Vladimir Putin has signed a law abolishing the required annual declaration of officials' incomes starting next year, which means that instead of having a transparent system that can at least give the average Russian a little bit of insight into how much money their public officials are making, right? Instead, it's being replaced by a, quote, permanent anti-corruption control program, which, of course, no Russian will get to look inside and will be fully controlled by the state. And this, I think, is hysterical, but this is a function, again, of the fact that Putin's slowly realizing that in a failing economy, he's increasingly having to rely on basically Venezuelization. And this is this idea that when your economy gets worse and worse, the only way to buy loyalty is through finances and financially supporting more and more people. But when an economy gets worse and worse, the government's budget gets tighter and tighter. And so the only way left is to allow, enable, and encourage corruption. And so this is the function. I mean, again, no one's a patriot when your family is starving, right? When your family is starving, you gather food, right? You get your family fed, and you're not going to care who or how does it, how it's done. This is, but this is the problem that Putin's running into, is that a lot of these government officials that run the day-to-day of the Russian government can't afford to eat or work. And he doesn't have the money to increase their salaries. And so he says, listen, just don't worry about it. You got to take a little bit extra cash on the side to process forms faster. You got to get kickbacks on local contracts. Just we won't ask about it. Just do it. And yeah, it makes society all in all way worse. It makes your government function way worse for your average citizen. But you know what? It's a way to stay in power. And let me show you guys the state of the economy, though, that these oligarchs. Again, if you're an oligarch, every time you have this kind of shit, it draws, because remember, who's on the other side of that public corruption? It's businesses. So again, let's say Gazprom needs to lay tracks for an oil terminal through a Russian village. And the Russian village official goes, oh, we got a lot of permits, Gazprom. You know, it's going to take us a long time to get this thing permitted. A long time. And then a Gazprom official goes, oh my God, dude. Okay. Okay. What's it going to cost us to jump to the front of the line? And then the guy goes, a village mayor goes, oh, well, you know, my kid's school tuition is 12 grand this year. And Gazprom goes, okay, man, sure. Here you go. 12 grand. But then the problem is the next village has another mayor, right? Or the village has a construction office. And then the state has, an infrastructure office. And then the other village, the other oblast says, well, you're driving it through our territory. You got to give us a permit. And so every one of them, Gazprom or the warehouse or the port company or the railroad, they're all having to pay this out. And they're like, come on, everything is more expensive already. And now your officials are getting more corrupt. I mean, so you can see why Gazprom's gas exports to Europe drop into the lowest level since the 70s, right? Citigroup greenlit the sale of their Russian operations because they're operating at a 1.2 billion USD loss, right? You could see that Moscow's airport is going up for auction after it was seized by the state. Literally, the Russian government annexed it, declared it, we own this now, because it's so corrupt to U.S. citizens, and then it's Russian citizens, and then selling it off. That's fucking hysterical. That they literally just stole it from a company, and then are ransoming it back to the company that they stole it from. That's fucking crazy. I mean, yeah, I'd resort to writing an angry letter to Putin too. Jesus Christ. Russian manufacturing activity falls for the 7th straight month. These are all, by the way, from today's Moscow Times, okay? Just from today's. This is just from today's, guys. So again, Vladimir Putin's out here projecting this like tremendous strength or whatever. These are not the headlines, and this is not the actions of a company. Excuse me, a country. It's just operating as a company. A country that's doing a great fucking job. Okay. You combine this with the fact that Russian forces are losing way more troops than they're bringing in, and you're starting to see that maybe this war isn't going so great for old Vladimir Putin. Anyway, guys, hit subscribe. Thanks to GMAT Club, Henry Rooster, James Forrest, Paul, Peter Fucci, Sergei Zinchenko, Thomas Anderson, William Alexander, Georgia Vale 90, and all our lieutenant tier members. Hit subscribe. Catch you in the next one. Okay, don't log off. I'm still here. We're still here, lads. Okay. Yeah. You know, some people like the problem is that Russia never had a truly successful revolution. It's always been might makes right since the revolution. I mean, well, okay. Nobody's going to argue that Russia hasn't had successful revolutions. They put out the Tsar. They created the Soviet Union. And then after the Soviet Union, they had all these independent republics. By the way, some republics in the post-Soviet era have done pretty well. Like other Iron Curtain countries, like let's see. Like let's take a look. Okay, post-Soviet countries. Let's try to see if we can finagle this. Here you go. Republics of the Soviet Union. Which ones have done okay? Dissolution of the Soviet Union. Okay. Tatarstan. Okay, so a bunch of these were tried to create a new union. Central Asia. Boris Yeltsin. Let's see. Okay. Estonia, right? Estonia is done. The Republic of Estonia has thrived in the post-Soviet era. Lithuania thrived in the post-Soviet era. Latvia thrived. Azerbaijan, Georgia has done pretty well, actually. Well, Russia is Russia. Uzbekistan, not great. Moldova, not great. Ukraine, not great. I'd much rather live in the Baltics. Belarus, definitely not. Turkmen, Armenia, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, so, you know, basically the Baltics. The Baltics have thrived. Yeah, interesting. Estonian SSR. But where's the actual Estonia? Where's the actual restoration of Estonia? Where's the government of Estonia? Anyway, I really think that you have it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag if the revolution was successful or not. Does that make sense? Okay. Thanks, Ariane Azula, for becoming a member. Oh yeah, that's what I forget to say. If you guys become a specialist or lieutenant tier member with the YouTube membership button, it will get you access. It'll get you access to Combat Fit News. We have a special login for you. Okay. Neolithic Transitra. Thoughts on LiDAR? Maybe a real pickle for subs. I'm very bearish towards navies in the future. I mean, I'm not arguing that there isn't going to be naval warfare and that naval power isn't extremely important. Naval power is extremely important, but it will look different. The weapons and the fights will look different, right? Again, LiDAR is hard because remember, in the sea has these 2-3 foot waves, right? So if you're a sea drone and you have 2-3 foot waves, LiDAR is going to actually have a really hard time discerning discerning a drone from just the undulation of the sea, right? And Iced Zinnia, $10. Thanks all for doing so much. I'm a site member and the whole family loves the gum. Hell yeah, right? the number of like retirees and like busy soccer moms that love strike gum. I really thought this was going to be for like basically super busy workout bros, cops, firefighters, like long shift workers, and military. That's who I thought my audience was going to be. And the number of people who are just like, yo, dude, my mom's also like my retired mom's also busy. She needs to pick me up at the end of the day. Like, and she loves straight gum. She just chews it and goes. I'm like, oh, okay, dope. That's hard. Yeah. So, yeah, I love it. Hell yeah, getting the family hooked on it. Paul, you were on the ground in Ukraine at the same time as Chris Cappy. I was. In fact, when I was in Ukraine last year, people were like, "Whoa, I thought you were in Kursk," and I'm like, "No, I've been here in the East the whole time." They're like, "Are you sure you weren't in Kursk?" I was like, "Yeah, I definitely wasn't in Kursk." It's because people thought I was Chris Cappy. Obviously, Chris Cappy has great hair. I have no hair, so that's how you can tell us apart. Okay. Okay, one other troll I'm going to respond to, and then we're going to get out of here. Merrick says there are obviously more than 100 UN members supporting the One China policy. Oh my God. One China policy. Now what? How do you invade your own land? Okay, well, the One China policy just says there should be one government. Doesn't say which one. Right? And also, there are a total of 212 UN members. So it's fair to say most countries don't support the Chinese annexing Taiwan. And that's because most independent countries have some asshole neighbor like Russia who wish they could claim part or all of the neighboring country. And once you've been on the receiving end of that, well, you go, I don't think we should enable this kind of behavior. UN is just trash. That is true, but it is a good bellwether over stances countries are willing to take. Also, remember, if China's very rich and your country stands to make a lot of money, or just your upper class stands to make a lot of money by partnering with China, and your fucking Somaliland or some shit, like Somaliland's stance on the China-Taiwan question or whatever is irrelevant. Okay, they're not going to impact it either way at all. So, Anyway, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll catch you guys in a future live.